on some things, especially about you as futurologists, you as the kind of, you are the inventors. I liked his point about that we're talking to you as the people who are going to be making these decisions. And what I wanted to think about is censorship. What is it? What is your definition of it? I won't stop and ask you the question, but I want you to think about this, because I don't want to use up my 10 minutes taking questions. But it's important, as Leander mentioned at the beginning, in terms of studying history and culture, and as a book historian, I think it's really important that in order to predict the future, you need to know where things have come from. And particularly in terms of censorship, this is important. So you need to know what it is. I won't read all of this out, but I can leave the slides if you wish. About who a censor is, one who censors something, an official ban in some countries, or it can be a person, okay, who actually does the censoring. And I'm using the Oxford English Dictionary for this. To act as a censor, so it can be a verb, to actually do the censoring itself. Or it's also official supervision. That is something that comes through in terms of political, social, market censorship. And these are the definitions that you're playing with. But how does this play out in contemporary society? And how do you see this playing out in the future? And what will your role be? Either as potentially working to think about censorship or resisting censorship. So if we go right back, books and what people were reading have always worried people in power. Always, always, always. From the beginning of the printing press onwards. And you had, of course, the Vatican, the Catholic Church, had its Index Laborum Prohibitorum. And as Harris and Myers talk about, the potential of the printing press was rapidly understood by the Pope. Because you could produce things quickly. It's not scribal culture, it's out there, and what people read, how they educate themselves, worries people in power. This great quote, many books by, quote, a motley crew through a distinguished group of scholars and humanists such as Machiavelli, Rabelais, Erasmus, and other writers, people we class as the classic writers, have all come under the censor's pen. But the index, he's talking here about the Index Laborum Prohibitorum, is actually a catalog of the books that evaded self-restraint. And what I want you to be thinking about is self-censorship, what we don't put into print. And he said, and in that sense, it's a list of the ones that got away. Okay? These are the ones that actually got out there. People were willing to take that chance. Very briefly, various kind of legal strictures. These are ones in the UK, the Stationers' Company Register. This is in the 16th and 17th centuries. The Royal Proclamation for the Encouragement of Piety and Virtue, with that long title, you can tell it's 18th century. And the Obscene Publications Act of 1857. And we can go on, and I won't go into detail of each of those, but you can get the idea that these were continuous throughout history, legal and political sanctions. But you also had things like circulating libraries. And I don't know how many people think about a library as a potential censor, but particularly in the 19th century in England, Mudies, W.H. Smith, and Boots were run by individuals who a lot of writers and artists considered these kind of moralists who decided, middle-class moralists who decided what people could read. Not the cutting edge of literature, but what would keep their subscribers coming. Because these were subscription libraries, so that you get money into it, commercial interest, but also the sense of controlling what people read. According to gender, because women are very susceptible, to class, because let's face it, the working class, they need to be controlled, and of course children who are very impressionable. You have censorship in time of war. The Defense of the Realm Act was originally set up to control information that could get out to the enemy, but it was increasingly used to actually censor public opinion. You have then literary censorship in the 20th century, people reading out of context, taking snippets of the great works of literature, and saying, this is obscene. So this is a quote from one of the cases, Trying Ulysses by James Joyce, one of the great works of modernist literature. As might be supposed, I have not had the time nor had the inclination to read through this book. I have, however, read through these pages, and there's lots and lots of filth in it. Okay? This idea of reading out of context. You read for the dirty bits. And these are just some more examples of books which have banned in the 20th century. Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead, famously in one of its beginning editions, had the sort of, you know, if you said F, asterisk, asterisk, K, so you wouldn't spell the word out, or you have a dash. And so the Southern actress Tallulah Bankhead said, "You're the young man that doesn't know how to spell fuck," when she met him, as this joke. Lady Chatterley's Lover, the one that we quote as the big one, which challenged the new Obscene Publications Act in the UK of 1959. Famously, no witnesses for the prosecution, loads for the defense, prosecuting attorney. Isn't a book you would wish even your wife or servants to read. Again, gender and class happening there. So, where are we going to go now, though? This is the big question. I don't have the prediction. I would suggest that perhaps religion is the new sex. In the past, it was concerned about explicit sexual material. Now we have issues with religion. How are we not offending religious groups, Harry Potter books, Christian fundamentalists in particular in the US? But if you think back about what I said about libraries in the UK and becoming guardians of public morality, there's actually the American Library Association that really stood up to a lot of these efforts to ban books and reading for children. Of course, Islamic fundamentalism is also a big issue, the Satanic Verses, which caused riots and book burnings and death. Publishers should not be cowed. This was an example of another book which was pulled by Random House, eventually published by an independent publisher in the UK. I think his offices were bombed, or not firebombed, but it had like various incidents. And the lead guy from Penguin, who was one of the publishers at the time of the Salman Rushdie thing, said that it's all very well and good being very upstanding and moral about these things, and I'm not going to be cowed, but if people's lives are involved, how do you make those decisions? Very quickly, another example, a book pulled from the Dubai Book Festival because it had a homosexual relationship with a sheikh. J.M. Coetzee, important writer. Censorship is not an occupation that attracts intelligent, subtle minds. Think about that quotation. Critical arguments, George Orwell. Literary censorship is that it's largely voluntary. We come back to self-censorship. How do we censor ourselves? What do we not say? Richard Abel. Book publishers have a responsibility to apply a set of intellectual concepts to make credible and defensible judgments. Okay, again, publishers shouldn't be cowed. They need to be intelligent. And Sue Curry-Jansen, this idea that we haven't got past censorship, even though we consider ourselves a liberal society, but in fact, state and church censorship has been replaced by market censorship. If it doesn't sell, if you have competing economic situations going on with your media companies, what do you not publish? Okay, which was the case with this. U.S. Patriot Act, extending to looking at what people could read in libraries and keeping a list of that. So, censorship causes blindness. Read. Think about examples. Google in China, Danish cartoons, the way in which the Arab Spring and the situation in Iran has been helped by media, by mobile phones. How do you actually stop people discussing things? And should you?